Hello everyone and welcome back to another exciting episode of Boyographic, the show in which I, Matt, the Game Boy, will take you through the highs and lows of the Game Boy library one cart at a time. This week we'll be looking at a Konami classic, it's Nemesis. Nemesis is a side-scrolling shooter for the Game Boy that, despite its name, is actually part of Konami's well-known Gradius series, but is considered to be a spin-off title from the main series. The name is actually taken from the 1986 port of the original game to the MSX, which added a few new levels only available in the PC Engine copy of the game up until that point. Therefore, it's fair to say that this game is actually a spin-off of a spin-off, as the Game Boy version even does a few things that the TurboGrafx version doesn't. But we'll get into those later, because what Nemesis does very well is scale Gradius down to a small handheld, without losing the feeling of the original game. You fly and shoot with ease, and while there can be a little screen tearing in the later levels, it's generally very playable. Strangely though, your ship isn't the fabled Vic Viper on this jolly through intergalactic war zones, but the Proteus 911, because according to the back of the box, your character is supposedly an interplanetary police chief trying to hunt down a villain known as King Nemesis. Which is just a gun wall that, unlike Brain from the original Gradius, doesn't go down without a fight. As anyone who's played Gradius will know, the power-ups you get for your ship are based on a selection bar called the Power Meter, which, when you collect capsules from the remnants of enemy vessels, offer you a different and stackable power-up. These are speed, which makes your ship fly and fire faster, missiles, which allow you to send bombs along the bottom of the screen, a shield, and options, which are small orbs that float around with your ship and retain the same power-ups as you. This means you can either fire up to 3 standard shots, or by equipping the double shot or laser, then the option will fire them, meaning you can seriously beef up the Proteus 911's firepower. And this is where the skill comes into Nemesis. As it's very easy to collect power-ups, it's almost inevitable that by the end of the first level, your ship will have become a juggernaut, and taking out even the most difficult of enemies will require little to no effort. However, your ship can only sustain a few hits with the shield and only one without it, meaning that it's very easy to die in the later, more hectic stages. This is where your true skill as a player comes in. How do you fight off overwhelming odds that expect you to be a flying superpower by the time you reach them, and you're outmatched both in numbers and firepower? Well, simply by surviving long enough to regain your lost arsenal. The game starts you off with only 2 lives, but these are adjustable to the start screen, and you can have up to 99 chances to beat the game if you so wish. You can also pick any of the game's 5 levels from here, which is incredibly handy for a portable game that lacks a save system, meaning you can pick up and play where you left off. These levels naturally are almost the same as Gradius, in that you start with a volcano level, then experience Nemesis' only unique stage, the biological zone, before returning to the game's original Moai stage, then flying into a more PC version of the TurboGrafx 16's Wasteland, before finishing up in a tweaked version of the classic base known as Fortress in this Game Boy version. Once this is all said and done, the game will do what any Gradius game does and loop after the credits, meaning you can take on bigger and badder odds until you run out of lives, or decide to get one yourself and put the handheld down. Visually, apart from the pre-mentioned screen tearing, Nemesis looks fantastic. It's a little bit of a shame that the Proteus 911 feels so static in flight, especially compared to the Vic Viper's signature turning animation, but it does its job well. Enemies are varied and the bosses look spectacular, but for me, Nemesis' true shining beacon is the game's score, which is done by Mishuri Yamane of Psychoden fame, Tomoyo Tomita of Parodius, Shinya Sakamoto of Russian Attack, and Yuji Takenouchi, the lead sound designer of Dark Souls. So, with a roster like that, how could Nemesis be anything but an audio delight? Nemesis is a pretty common game, so pick it up if you get the chance. Even better yet, if you can get a copy of Konami Collection Volume 1 for the Game Boy Color, you'll get this as well as Castlevania Adventures, enhanced visually for the Game Boy Color and without any of the nasty screen tearing. And that's it for this week's Boyographic, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed taking a flight through Nemesis with me. If you have, then please feel free to subscribe to the channel and tell others that you think may like this as well. You can check out some of our previous Boyographic videos in which I look at other Game Boy releases. They come out every Friday. Some Boy Curious, in which I look at the oddities and bootlegs of the Game Boy system, as well as all the glory. Long plays of these Game Boy games with none of the deaths, but all of the glory. You can also find me on Twitter at Gameboy, and you can also find me on a little podcast called Tom and Matt Tap, which is published on iTunes and Stitcher every Sunday. Until next week, Game Boys and Girls, game on.